I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
All right. Happy Friday, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. My special guest tonight is Abayami Asakiwi. He is the editor of Pan-African Newswire. Welcome, Abayami. Thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation.
So I guess I'll get started with this because I know a lot of us have been discussing the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. I think I've been talking about Israel and Palestine for at least almost 3 years. At least I know the first year of the show is when I started talking about it. But I have noticed that there doesn't seem to be a lot discussion about some of the other humanitarian crises that are happening all over the world, in particular countries in Africa. And Sudan has been brought to my attention now about last year, I believe. I talked about the fact that I thought that Sudan was going to be the next proxy war. And that was based off of a video footage that I saw from Al Jazeera. And now I'm reading that there is also a humanitarian crisis in Sudan and people are starving there as well. So first and foremost, if you could please educate the audience, why is this humanitarian crisis happening in Sudan? And is this connected to the war conflict that was discussed over a year ago?
Well, on April 15th of last year, 2023, there was an open, hostile military split between the two main armed forces in the Republic of Sudan. You have the Sudanese Armed Forces, which is headed by General Al-Fatah al-Burhan. And then there's the Rapid Support Forces that is headed by Mohammed Delgado, also known as Hameti. These two factions fell out completely. They had a disagreement on the way forward in regard to the demand by the masses of people in Sudan for a democratic transition. These are well-armed military units, and they have been fighting it out at the expense of the civilian population in Sudan now for almost 14 months. Now, this has precipitated a huge humanitarian crisis. Millions of people have fled the country. Some have gone over towards Port Sudan on the Red Sea and moved into Saudi Arabia and other areas in West Asia. Some have crossed over into the Republic of South Sudan, which used to be a part of the Republic of Sudan, which also has its own internal problems. So the humanitarian crisis is worsening because repeated attempts to try to get the two military armed wings to sit down together and hammer out an agreement has not worked. The armed forces headed by General Burhan wants an outright military victory against the RSF. The RSF has indicated that it does want to engage in peace talks, yet the Sudanese Armed Forces leader, General Burhan, is not willing to engage in these type of dialogues. So that is the root cause of the crisis, and it continues. And there are still efforts on the part of the African Union, on the part of the Republic of South Sudan, as well as the United Nations to try to bring about a truce between these two factions. And you're right, it has been overshadowed by the situation in Gaza. And of course, it is related, of course, to the situation in Gaza because the United States has been attempting for many years to control the situation in Sudan. They have instigated conflict for at least a decade and a half. and they're continuing to interfere in the internal affairs of the Republic of Sudan, and therefore there's a lot of apprehension and unwillingness to even engage with the United States at this point in regard to the way forward in the Republic of Sudan.
So some of the Sudanese people have become refugees in other countries, and I'm kind of curious because we've heard yet again that other Arab nations do not want to take in Palestinian people. Of course, a lot of right-wing politicians have been using that basically as their support for Israel. And they've basically said, well, none of these other countries want to take them in. So that ought to tell you something. But I don't feel that way. I do feel as though it's not those other countries' responsibilities to fix the problems that the U.S. government and Israel has caused. However, I'm curious about the sentiment in those countries that Sudanese refugees have now moved to or are residing in right now. How are they being treated in those countries, and do they feel welcome there?
It's a mixed bag. In Egypt, there's been problems because Egypt itself is facing profound economic crises. They are under a International Monetary Fund restructuring program, and therefore they're required to cut government spending and spending on public institutions inside the country. In South Sudan, they themselves as well have tremendous economic and humanitarian problems. South Sudan exists because of a split between the Republic of Sudan and the Republic of South Sudan, which gained full independence in 2011. They also have undergone internal problems as well. So you cannot blame necessarily African countries or West Asian countries for being reluctant to bring in additional displaced persons. In regard to the Palestinian issue, there are millions of Palestinians who are outside of Palestine. Many of them live in Jordan, in Syria, in other places, even in Egypt itself. So that's why they do not want to come to an agreement with the Palestinians because they would have to have a right of return. And if all the Palestinians who have been displaced, at least since 1948, and there were those who were displaced before that, would be well over 7 to 8 million Palestinians, and they could easily outvote the Israeli settlers in a general democratic multi-party election. So all of these problems, as you mentioned before, have been instigated by U.S. foreign policy. And of course, why should other countries who are also struggling, who are also dealing with underdevelopment, who also have to accept World Bank and International Monetary Fund bailouts, why should they have to bear the brunt of the activities that stem directly from U.S. foreign policy in Africa and also in West Asia?
That's right. That's very well said. And another point I want to bring up as well, this idea of a genocide. Would you consider what's happening in Sudan right now to be a genocide, and why or why not?
No, I don't consider it to be a genocide because they're all African people. You have different ethnic groups. For example, in the Darfur region, 2 decades ago, there was a tremendous amount of accusations against the former government of President Hassan al-Bashir, charging him with genocide against the people, some of the people in the West Darfur region. However, a number of objective analyses of that crisis, beginning in the early 2000s, say that it was not genocide, that the U.S. and Western countries were using that allegation to, in fact, weaken the Republic of Sudan, to split the country, and to also bring it back under the complete influence of the United States. We have to understand that prior to the partition of the country in 2011, that Sudan was emerging as one of the largest and most profitable oil-producing states in the world. Also, geographically, they represented the largest geographic nation state in Africa. So there was much incentive on the part of the United States and other Western imperialist powers, particularly Britain as well, because it was a former British colony. They wanted to weaken Sudan by overthrowing its government. The International Criminal Court had actually issued warrants against the former president of the Republic of Sudan, charging him with war crimes crimes against humanity, and even genocide. So we have to take these things into consideration. Now, if they're charging genocide in Sudan, then why won't they charge or accept the charge of genocide in Palestine? Because they have interests in Palestine that requires the settler colonial class that has been dominating there since 1948. It is like a major military and political outpost for imperialism in West Asia and North Africa. So no, I would not consider the situation in Sudan as a genocide, although what is going on there is highly disturbing. It is a humanitarian crisis, and it's imperative that the two factions reach a peace agreement and also move back towards reaching some type of democratization process. Since the uprising in 2018 and 2019, which led to the demise of President al-Bashir's government, the masses there want democracy. They want a multi-party democratic system. But the military, which is so entrenched in the economy and within the state, does not want to relinquish power. And this has a lot to do with the fact that the fighting is still going on.
Well, another thing that we've discussed on the show is the Democratic Republic of the Congo. So I was reading recently that over 6 million people have been killed in the Congo. I do know one of the resources in the Congo, cobalt, is heavily desired. For those who are not aware, cobalt can be used for rechargeable batteries. So it is a very resource rich area. When you look at what's happening in the Congo, why do you feel, and tell me the truth, do you feel because it's an African country, because why do you feel that mainstream media and some independent media isn't really talking much about what's happening in the Congo when over 6 million people have been killed there when you do compare it to the death toll in Gaza? Why do you feel more people aren't talking about that?
Well, here again, the Western imperialist countries have vast interests in Congo. We have to go back to the 1870s, the 1880s, all the way up to the early part of the 20th century, where it's estimated that 8 to 10 million Africans were slaughtered in Congo by the Belgian monarchy, Leopold I, and also later by the Belgian government, which took over control of the administration of Congo around 1908. Even after that period of colonization, in 1959, the independence movement was led by Patrice Lumumba. He was imprisoned, and then he had to be released because of the widespread support that he had in the country. When he did win the prime ministership in 1960, the U.S., and this is well documented, people like Larry Devlin, former President Dwight Eisenhower, all sought to overthrow the Lumumba government because he wanted to build a national government. He believed in Pan-Africanism, and he believed in anti-imperialism. And he was overthrown, later executed in 1961. And since that time, the country has been highly unstable. Even with the overthrow of Mobutu Sese Seko in 1997, there were still problems with the intervention of Rwanda and Uganda. 1998 led to a 5-year war that brought in the Southern African Development Community, along with others on the side of Uganda and Rwanda. Of course, now it appears as if in the western part of the country and the central part of the country, it is somewhat stable. But however, in the east, the mineral-rich east, which borders on Rwanda and Uganda, conflict continues. People are still being killed, they're being displaced. And of course, it has not been the regional countries, the East African Community and IGAD and the others have not been able to bring peace and stability in the DRC. You don't hear a lot about what's going on in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo because, as you mentioned before, it's overshadowed by what's going on in Palestine, what's going on in Ukraine, the hostility towards China, the DPRK, and so forth. But fortunately, there are publications that focus on African affairs, and they do report on a regular basis what is going on in the DRC as well.
That's right. I remember, I don't know how old everyone is in the audience, but I do remember the genocide in Rwanda. I remember the Clinton administration in the beginning, they actually said that there was not a genocide happening in Rwanda. And I just want to say this to people because I want people to think about what the administration is saying now. You know, different president, but still, they said there was not a genocide in Rwanda. And then later on, they had to come back and apologize. And Bill Clinton, I think till this day, sometimes when he does interviews, he says that was a bad decision for him to make at that point in time, that he was incorrect, that there was a genocide that was happening in Rwanda. And so I say these things because I want people to sometimes just go back through history, not even that long ago, like you said, 1998. So not long ago, just go back through history and think about some of the ways our administration has denied that people were being slaughtered abroad. And I pivot back to Sudan because I want to mention this. This is actually something that was highlighted by the Middle East Eye. So we all know Macklemore, he made this song for Gaza, which I thought it's a great song. It's very powerful. There are now activists, and I want to pull this up here. Activists are calling on Macklemore. They say, keep your eyes on Sudan too. Activists urge Macklemore to cancel Dubai concert. And I want to get into this a little bit for people who are not aware. And I'll just slide a little bit forward here. So it talks about the song that he released for Gaza. Then it says, now almost a month after its release, social media users are calling on Macklemore to cancel his upcoming concert in the UAE due to the country's role in Sudan's civil war. And I want to get your take about this as well, Abiyami, because how is the United Arab Emirates, how are they involved in Sudan? And what do you think? Do you think Macklemore should also back out of this concert as well?
They are involved. Dubai, the United Arab Emirates, and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia stepped in after the fall of the al-Bashir government and pledged billions of dollars to try to stabilize the Sudanese government, even under the military. And this was problematic because the majority of the people inside the country were marching, demonstrating, engaging in nonviolent activity because they wanted a democratic dispensation. And that actually propped up the military regime. But that was to no avail because the two major factions within the military have now turned on each other. So there's no real military solution to the crisis in Sudan. It has to be a political solution. So I don't know if that artist understands that, and it's up to him and his management whether or not they're going to cancel the concert or not. A lot of times we don't know exactly what's at stake in these type of deals that take place, but there's a lot of Western investment as well in the UAE. But what's interesting is that over the last couple of years, the UAE and Saudi Arabia, which had been at odds over the whole situation in West Asia and the Persian Gulf, have normalized relations. And this has proved to be a problem for the United States because they're unable at this point to pit the UAE and Saudi Arabia against the Islamic Republic of Iran and other countries and the resistance movements that have sprung up in West Asia, in Syria, Iraq, what's going on now in Lebanon and South Lebanon, and also in Yemen, which has taken a lead role in an attempt to impose a blockade against the Israeli ports. I think that the UAE is undergoing a transformation, at least in regard to its foreign policy, and that has helped in a lot of ways to isolate the U.S. In that region.
So what do we do to, or what should, how can African countries get the West out of their business? And I ask that because it's obvious, like a lot of these problems are initiated or instigated by the West, particularly the United States government. How do they get the U.S. government out of their countries? And is it possible for those countries to actually just lead their own people without any interference from the West?
It is possible. It was done prior to the 15th and 16th century when the so-called Western Hemispheric nations the great powers of the world, for example, the United States and Canada, were not the center of the world economic system. The centers was in the Indian Ocean basin, in Africa, and various parts of Asia. We see that returning in a limited degree, but we can see developments that are going on now that prefigure the displacement of Western imperialism as the center of the world economic system. If we look at what's going on in these small countries in the Sahel region in West Africa, for example, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, even Chad to a certain degree today, they have asked France and the United States to take their military forces out of the country. This has been a profound shock, particularly to the Biden administration, because they don't understand the dynamics of what's going on now in various African countries. So that is one example of what could take place. Other examples, we have the formation of the Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa Plus Summit, the BRICS Summit, which is expanded to bring in other countries such as Saudi Arabia, Ethiopia, and Egypt. Even though these countries don't have the same type of political system, they don't have ideological uniformity, but they do indicate that there's a strong desire on the part of the majority of the population of the peoples of the world to break with the hegemony of Western imperialism. For example, the G77 plus China is another formation that encompasses approximately 80% of the world's population. We have a revival within the non-aligned movement that encompasses a huge percentage of the world's population. The African Union, despite all of its problems, despite all of its weaknesses, has been able to stand up against U.S. imperialism as it relates to the war in Ukraine, not supporting the aggressive policies of the United States, backing the Ukrainian regime and creating the conditions that could spiral into World War III. And also on Palestine, the AU has issued pretty strong statements on the situation in Palestine. They have backed the South African lawsuit against the state of Israel under the Genocide Convention. It's a slow process, but I believe that there's no other alternative than for these countries, these geopolitical regions, to exert their independence, to unify, and to reclaim their rightful place in the world. The United States at this point has only one option, it appears, and that is the military option. And it hasn't worked in Eastern Europe. We look at what's going on in Ukraine and Russia. The Russian economy has gotten stronger since they embarked upon the special military operation. They have not been able to defeat the resistance. In Palestine, they've killed over 37,000 people officially, but the resistance forces are still fighting. So I think that the geopolitical regions of the world outside of the West, and even those populations inside of Canada, inside the United States, inside of Western Europe, too, are growing larger, and they're developing a sense of awareness and unity. So I think it's inevitable that we're going to undergo a profound transformation of the international powers relationships and also the international structures which have governed foreign relations over the last 200 years.
Do you think that other African countries should entertain applying to be a part of BRICS? We know South Africa is a part of it, but what about some of the other countries in Africa? Would that be beneficial for them? And should they be open to maybe some type of help from China or Russia? I've heard different opinions about this from people. Some people feel that China is helping countries in Africa, and then I've heard from other people that not everyone in Africa is really, I guess, welcoming China's presence. Same with Russia. What do you think about that? The possibility of other African countries joining BRICS?
Others have applied. They're very interested in joining, and I think it will happen eventually. I think China now being perhaps the largest trading partner with the African Union member states, they have built up infrastructure in various countries. In East Africa, they built railway systems, rapid transit systems. They constructed the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, state-of-the-art office complex there, and they're working in other projects across Africa. The same situation with the Russian Federation. A lot of African countries were engaged in trade, particularly in the area of grain and other agricultural products, plus agricultural inputs such as fertilizer and machinery were being supplied by the Russian Federation as well as Ukraine. That's why immediately after the beginning of the Russian special military operation in Ukraine in February of 2022, the African Union sent a delegation to both Russia and Ukraine asking for a mediated settlement in the conflict. And they rebuffed the U.S. State Department Assistant Secretary Molly Fee for Africa, who tried to intimidate African journalists, African governments into accepting the U.S. position on Ukraine. But no, what's happening is very detrimental to the food supply in Africa and the production of agricultural goods on the continent. Countries like Egypt, for example, received a tremendous amount of agricultural products and trade from both Russia and Ukraine. So that's why the African Union countries are saying this war needs to stop. It needs to be settled diplomatically. And this is what the Biden administration is opposed to. They have struck down every attempt to try to mediate the conflict in Ukraine. There were negotiations initially in Belarus right after the war started, and then later in Turkey. And the United States sabotaged those negotiations. There was also the Minsk Accords, which was signed in 2014, 2015, around that time period, and they were sabotaged as well. So this is Biden's war, and as a result of it, the U.S. government is suffering. The people in Western Europe and Africa and other geopolitical regions of the world are suffering. And I do not believe that the U.S., by backing Ukraine, that they will prevail. Many Ukrainians have been killed, and many have left the country. And right now, they have a very difficult time even recruiting soldiers into the Ukrainian military. And the Russians are involved in an offensive right now. And the only solution that we hear coming out of the White House is to send more weapons, to engage in more provocative military actions against Russia. So yes, that is the problem that we're facing right now. And the U.S., even in regard to Sudan, could have done a much better job in bringing about a democratic transformation. They attempted under the Trump administration to have the Republic of Sudan to recognize the state of Israel, to undermine solidarity with the Palestinians. And that was their policy across the entire West Asia and North Africa region. And that policy has failed completely right now. And even Saudi Arabia has not normalized relations with Israel. And even Egypt right now, which had normalized relations with Israel back 45 years ago, it's very strained, the relationship now between Egypt and the state of Israel because of the problems that are going on at the Rafah border crossing and other issues that are impacting Egypt as well as the Palestinians. So I think the United States itself has to change its foreign policy, and they feel they cannot afford to change their foreign policy because without being hegemonic and domineering in terms of political, economic, and military strength, they feel they have no future in the evolving world system.
Well said. Here's a question, a great question here from a kid. Please ask the guests if there are any leaders or a specific movement in Africa that could unite them. Good question.
Yeah, I think if we look at what's happening in the Sahel region, although these are military regimes that have taken such an anti-French and anti-U.S. position, and we have to look at the African Union Charter itself, which calls for unity, eventual unification, the introduction of a currency, continental-wide AU currency. So yes, I think that people are looking in that direction. I don't think it's any one organization at this point. It will have to be many different political parties, governments, mass organizations coming together to hammer out a program for the future.
Abiyami, thank you so much. One more quick question. There have also been Jemima Pierre, she was on the show to talk about the crisis in Haiti. And one of the things that she mentioned is that they're trying to actually recruit the U.S. government, trying to recruit soldiers from Kenya
Yes.
to fight in Haiti. Why
Yeah.
would why would soldiers from African countries choose to go and fight in Haiti?
Money. The president, unfortunately, William Ruto, who was just here last week, given a red carpet treatment at the White House, he should know. He should definitely know that Joe Biden, who is waging war in Ukraine, who's backing the genocide against the Palestinians, who's attempting to undermine the strength and the sovereignty of the People's Republic of China, does not mean Kenya or Haiti any good. And they want to send 1,000 Kenyan police to Haiti, ostensibly to bring back law and order. But they're not looking at the history of U.S. military and police involvement in Haiti. And at the same time, there's tremendous opposition inside Kenya itself to this deployment of 1,000 police officers to Haiti. The courts there have said this is not constitutional. There's no provision in the Kenyan constitution that would require or suggest the need for deploying police halfway around the world. So I think William Ruto is making a serious mistake. He's polarizing his own population. He's, in fact, alienating the people in Haiti and other progressive forces in the Caribbean. And I do not believe that this will work. The courts in Haiti and in Kenya say that they cannot deploy police to Haiti. He seems to be interested in doing it anyway. So he'll have to pay the price politically if this operation goes awry. And if Kenyan police are killed there, and if they're in fact defeated in some type of military conflict that will take place in Haiti.
Well, Abami, Abayemi, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for the invitation.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, guys, that was Abayemi. I always want to say Abayemi, and he is the editor of Pan-African News Wire. I think the first time I heard about him, he was on Danny Haifong's show, and I think this was a couple years ago. He's on Danny's show with him and Margaret Kimberly. So definitely follow him on Twitter. If for those of you who are on Twitter, go ahead and do that and check out some of his work. So I know a lot of you have reached out and asked me to definitely bring on someone to talk about what's happening in Sudan. I definitely want to make sure we're not overlooking other countries that are going through humanitarian crisis as well. And I do feel like there hasn't been enough coverage about what's happening in Sudan. So definitely. But it is Friday, fam. It is Friday. Are you excited? We have other things to discuss tonight. Other things to discuss. Let's go ahead and hit the comments, shout out patrons, shout out the thumbnail, and we'll get right into other news stories. So welcome. Shout out to Lonzo Thompson for becoming a Sabby member. Give Lonzo a big whoop, whoop, fam. Whoop, whoop. Thank you, Tim, though, for the super chat. Yes, 10 million people were killed by Leopold. So way more than the Holocaust, but those were Black. So, yeah, I know. This is another, we have to have this discussion sometime. We have to have this discussion sometime. And again, that is not to throw any shade on what has happened from the Holocaust. Like, obviously, that is a tragedy, but we do have to talk about other tragedies that have happened all over the world. I feel like I'm in class, Sabby. Love it. Free Palestine. Thank you, Sparky. Build a better world with bricks. Shout out to Marie Nadine Pierre for the super sticker. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sir Bikes a Lot Day. The only way the world gets off the yoke of the U.S. empire is to stop using our money. When that happens, you think the economy sucks now. Just you wait. Yeah, and this is why I think some countries want to move away from the U.S. dollar. Thank you, Sparky. As far as countries of different systems, languages, and cultures being in BRICS, I say viva la difference. It'd be a dull world if all countries were a copy of the others. Good point there. And thank you for this as well. What's up with Cote d'Ivoire? Didn't the U.S. move their troops from Niger to Cote d'Ivoire, displacing the French? I have to check that. I'm not sure about that. But good question. And shout out to Raphael, who's been a member for 6 months, says, love you, my queen. Oh, thank you. So sweet. Love you guys too. This mouse pad is giving me a headache. I think it's time to get a new mouse pad. I've had it for quite some time. And shout out to Muada for the super sticker. Thank you so much. Let's go ahead and give a shout out to Sabby Patrons fam. Thank you guys so much for being a Sabby patron. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories. Ultimate, Sabsters. Don't forget about those Sabinators as well. I said them backwards there, but they're still there. There are also Sabbies in the mix. Sabbies in the mix. Sabby's in the mix. Sorry, guys, I'm silly. You know this. And of course, members, thank you so much. Really do appreciate you. You can see their names here, and their names are also scrolling across the bottom of the screen on the ticker. And I want to give a shout out to new Sabby patrons. I believe I shouted out Steven last night, but we also want to give a shout out to Isabel Supertron. Isabel Supertron. If I had a name like that, when I walked into the room, let me tell you something. If I had a name like that and I walked into the room, let's say we're just going to, I don't know, an event or something that you have to check into. And they say, what is your name? Isabel Supertron. That is the entrance I would make. Isabel's probably like, no, Sabby. Oh, man. All right, guys. So we do have more stories to discuss tonight. Let's go ahead and share that beautiful thumbnail there. Did I do stop share? Yeah. Make sure I do share. Share the thumbnail. And these are the other stories that we're going to discuss tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get into it. Tonight, we are discussing Briahna Joy Gray is fired from the Hill Rising. And you can see Bree does not have a good look on her face there. She is not happy. I'm surprised I found that picture. Usually when I Google people and I'm looking for a picture, it's usually the same photos that appear at the top. So I've started to venture a little bit further towards the bottom of the page to bring in different photos. I don't like using the same photos over and over of people. We're also going to discuss RFK Jr. apparently is helping Joe Biden, but not intentionally. This is wild, fam. Not intentionally. Wait till you see we get into this discussion here. I think that people who want Joe Biden to win may actually stop telling RFK Jr. to drop out. We'll get into all of those numbers, etc. We're also going to discuss the State Department is covering for Israel yet again. This is in relation to the attack on the UN school in Gaza. We're going to get into that. That is Matt Miller there, one of the cronies from the State Department. It's either him or you'll see John Kirby or you'll see the guy that a lot of people say is Sagar's lookalike, that guy, right? So they have their go-to people. And for this particular situation, it is him. So we are going to talk about the discussion that he had there with the press briefing, what happened. And of course, Abayami was just here to discuss the crisis in Sudan. And I got to tell you guys, when we talk about Sudan, I have seen a number of videos and images of children just starving. Similar to Gaza. And we got to make sure that we cover everybody. So there's that. So outside Steelers fan says RFK Jr. is probably a plant. Well, we are about to get into that story. So let's do that. Believe it or not, it appears RFK Jr.'s numbers are actually starting to decrease. Now, this is interesting because RFK Jr. does have a pretty solid base. There are a lot of people that still support RFK Jr. Despite his decision on Israel and Gaza. And I'm not one of those people who supports him. But what has now happened, and I don't know if it's because of Gaza, but what has now happened is that RFK Jr.'s support is now starting to slip. Imagine that. His numbers have changed. I looked at multiple polls earlier today, and he is down in every poll that I looked at. Could this be because of Gaza? Let's dive in and see. Shout out to Case Study QB for this clip here. Case Study QB says support for RFK is slipping, but still significant. Let's get into this one, folks.
Let's take a look at RFK Jr. and his support, right? And so I want to put this in a historical context. Third party or independent candidates polling at 10% in June of election year. RFK Jr. is in a class that very few other independent or third party candidates have been a part of. You might remember Ross Perot in 1996, Ross Perot in 92, John Anderson in 1980, and George Wallace in 1968. So RFK Jr. is doing something right now that no third party or independent candidate has done since I was, well, we'll just say less than 10 years old. So he's doing something that's quite unusual. But as you pointed out, there has been a little bit of a fade in RFK Jr.'s support. So if we look back to late 2023, what we see here, 17% in Quinnipiac University, 15% in Fox News, 17% in Reuters Ipsos. Look, RFK Jr. is still polling in the double digits, but he's at 14%, a 3-point drop. You see a 4-point drop Fox News, and you see a 7-point drop in the Reuters Ipsos poll. So
let's pause here. So yes, I looked at all of these polls myself earlier today because I don't like to just go by what they show on the screen on mainstream media. I like to actually look at those sites myself to see it. But he is correct. Now, again, I don't know what is causing this trend. The only thing I could think of is Israel and Gaza for some. That could be part of it, right? The fact that Israel just recently bombed the refugee camp, a tent camp in Rafah, and now the UN school, and RFK Jr. still having the stance that he has, still walking around kissing up to Israel. That could be part of it. Another thing that could be part of it is ballot access. And this is one of the warnings we did give to candidates that chose to run independent and not through a third party. Now, to be fair, RFK Jr. Did try to run through the Libertarian Party, but they voted to have Chase Oliver as their nominee and not RFK Jr. So there went that. If that would have worked out, he would have been on the ballot in all 50 states, right? Because Libertarian Party gets access in all 50 states. But I would say a big part of this probably has to do with Gaza. So you're starting to see a decline for him. However, is it enough? Is it enough to still not have an impact on the general election? We'll see.
RFK Jr. still in an elite company when it comes to third party or independent candidates, but it does seem at this point he's seeing a bit of a fade, which is something that we often see with third party candidates as the election wears on and we get closer to election day.
Harry, what do the numbers say about one reason why he might be fading?
Yeah, one reason he might be fading. Is it A, that voters are saying, I got to go for a major party candidate. I don't want to waste my vote, as a lot of folks might potentially argue. Or is it that RFK Jr. is himself becoming less popular? And it does seem like RFK Jr. might be becoming a little less popular. So these are views of RFK. And take a look here. The favorable rating in November of 2023, 31%. Look at the favorable rating now, 25% according to Quinnipiac University. How about the unfavorable rating? That has gone up. 36% in November of 2023. And now what we're looking at is a 43% unfavorable rating. So
you guys see this?
Net favorability rating is now at minus 18 points. It was just at 5 points. That's an interesting looking 5. It's now at minus 18. So it does seem that RFK Jr. is becoming less popular. But who is he becoming less popular among, and who does he seem like he's hurting most in the presidential race? Joe Biden and Democrat, or Donald Trump and the Republicans? It's actually Republicans who seem to be more on the RFK Jr. bandwagon. In fact, if you were to look at the last Quinnipiac University poll, what you saw was that RFK Jr. was If you were looking at that poll, you would see that by 14 points, they preferred Donald Trump to Joe Biden. And that's why this slide is so important. What you see here is the GOP views of RFK Jr. Back in November of 2023, 41% favorable rating, now just 31. The unfavorable rating goes from 22 to 30. It's
22 to 30. So let me just chime in here for just a second. If I had to guess, I would assume RFK Jr. has lost support among young voters, right? So at one point in time, he was actually polling pretty favorably with young voters. But I think as this war in Gaza continues to escalate, I think that younger voters are now starting to pay more attention to some of RFK's positions when it comes to foreign policy. And they're starting to see, whoa, this guy is crazy when it comes to Israel and Gaza. Right. So that could be part of it. I don't know 100%, but I do know at one point he was doing particularly well with young voters. And now all of a sudden, I think that is where he is losing some of his support. So if I had to guess, I would assume that's where it's happening. I would also question too, I wonder if part of this is due to the fact that he did not get the nomination for the Libertarian Party. So I also question that as well. Maybe that has something to do with it. Maybe some people lost interest after he was not the nominee. And maybe they said, oh God, there's no way he's going to be on all 50 states now, right? On the ballot, all 50 states now. So that could also have something to do with it. But that being said, just because RFK Jr. is losing support and he's decreasing in the polls, that still doesn't mean he's not a problem. Now, what's really interesting, Morning Joe, they decided to talk about this, and, they see third party candidates as like a thorn in their side. Like they really just don't like third party candidates or independent candidates, and they see them as a nuisance. They're like, why are you in the race? You're making this more complicated because democracy, right? Democracy, right? I guess they just don't want us to have any type of democracy. So let's look at this clip here from Morning Joe with Simone Sanders and, of course, Mika and her dude. And I want you to hear the way that they talk about this, because what you are going to see, what the gentleman just told you, how RFK Jr. is actually getting more support from Republican voters than from Democrat voters. These polls now that were just released are now showing that by RFK Jr. staying in the race, Joe Biden actually is performing better. Believe it or not. Let's get into this.
A trio of new polls in critical battleground states shows that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. helps President Biden's chances of retaking the White House, though the margins are narrow. The latest poll from Main Street Research, Pollcom Lab, and Florida Atlantic University shows that in Wisconsin, Donald Trump holds a slight lead over Biden. But when Kennedy is added into the mix, Biden takes a 7-point lead. In Michigan,
let's go back to Wisconsin. She moved kind of fast there. Okay, this part right here, Wisconsin. So do you see what happens when you add RFK Jr. to the poll for Wisconsin? Joe Biden pulls ahead of Donald Trump 38% to 31%. Let's go on.
Lab and Florida Atlantic University shows that in Wisconsin, Donald Trump holds a slight lead over Biden. But when Kennedy is added into the mix, Biden takes a 7-point lead. In Michigan, the poll finds Trump and Biden tied at 45. But when Kennedy is added, Biden edges ahead 41 to 39.
And this one is still close. Even in Michigan, when they add RFK Jr., notice how close it still is to Donald Trump and Joe Biden. So I'm going to show you also after this what it looks like if RFK Jr. is not on the ballot in those states.
And while in Pennsylvania, Biden narrowly trails Trump in a head-to-head matchup, but takes the lead when Kennedy is a choice. We should note that those polls were partially completed online. Therefore, a margin of error could not be assigned. However, polls of these sizes would have margins of error of around 4%. Mike Barnicle, I still don't. What's he doing in this race? I don't know. I mean, I'm very, very leery of gaming out elections with a third contender. Yeah.
What is he doing in this race? Now, again, I'm not a fan of RFK Jr. I do not support RFK Jr.'s presidential run, but I do support independent and third party candidates. So the way that they're talking here, they just really give the game away. They make it very clear to you that they're not really for democracy. They just want you to vote for the candidate that they have already chosen for you and tell you that you should vote for. They don't want any real type of democracy in this country. So this is why I always continue to laugh when they say Trump is a threat to democracy. You guys are a threat to democracy. The media is a threat to democracy, mainstream media, because you guys don't even want people to know that there are third party independent candidates that are running in a presidential election. And if RFK Jr. wasn't even polling double digits from the beginning when he announced his run, you wouldn't even talk about him either. There's that, and there's the name recognition. So the fact that you guys say that Trump is a threat to democracy, and we can argue about that if you want to, but here you are telling people that these third party and independent candidates should not even be in the race. You are a threat to democracy. You and the corporations.
Well, you ought to be. You legitimately ought to be. Look, what is he doing in this race? He's running the race for himself. He's a very damaged individual. I've known him nearly all of his life. He's a very smart guy, and he's a nice guy, but he's a damaged guy. And the idea that he's running for president of the United States, I don't know how many ballots he's going to get on, John, but I don't think enough really to do a whole lot of damage.
Although it's
So I think that was an error there because they were talking about RFK, but they showed Donald Trump. So I think that was a studio area there or something like that. But it's really funny here when he says he's a damaged individual. Joe Biden isn't. Donald Trump isn't. Joe Biden, who can barely complete a sentence. Joe Biden, who's trying to sit down in chairs that don't exist. Joe Biden, who has cognitive decline, is not a damaged individual. Crime Bill Joe. Okay.
It could be a couple states, though. And it's interesting. Neither campaign's really sure what to make of this either. It's very clear from Donald Trump's increasingly frantic Truth Social attacks on Robert F. Kennedy Jr. that he's concerned that RFK could draw from him. But the Biden team, Donnie, is worried as well. And traditionally, we know, cycle after cycle, at least in recent history, third-party candidates tend to hurt the Democrats more. 2000, 2016, the best examples there. And the Biden team has been been more aggressive in their stance with RFK Jr. as well. What's your read on this? It's a pretty solid number. He's come 10, 11, 12, 16, depending on the state.
Yeah.
That's clearly a sign that people just aren't happy with the choice.
Look, the polls show that he's hurting Trump more than Biden. I don't know if I believe that. I think it's still a toss-up, frankly.
Yeah.
The Trump people obviously seem to be, at least on the surface, more worried about it. But look, history has been changed by Ralph Nader, by Jill Stein, by Ross Perot. This is a real issue, and this is something both sides have to grapple with. I agree with Mike. This is a damaged guy. He's not well. His family has begged him to not be in it, but he's here to stay, and it's going to be an issue.
And a trio.
It's funny to me when people say that their family members don't approve of them doing something. They're like, RFK Jr.'s family does not approve of him doing something, so therefore he should not do it. Right, because we all listen to what our family members tell us to do. We all listen to that. So I do want to show you here from this Reuters poll. So let me bring this up here because, like I said, I do like to go to the source myself. We'll make this a little bit bigger for the people in the bizac. Okay, this Reuters poll here, and we're going to jump down to the chart where they actually mentioned RFK Jr.'s name because I do want you to see numbers for yourself from the poll. So look at this here, okay? If the election were today and the candidates were Joe Biden, Donald Trump, and RFK Jr., who would you vote for? So we can see the columns here. Joe Biden is first, Donald Trump is second, RFK Jr. is third on the rows. For the columns, we see registered voter, Democrats, Republican, Independent. I want to show you something. If we look at RFK Jr., so I highlighted his name there, 6% of Democrats polled said they would vote for him, but 8% of Republicans polled said they would vote for him. So RFK Jr. right now, according to this particular poll, is receiving more support from registered Republican voters instead of registered Democrat voters. He's also receiving 17% from registered independents. So this is one of the polls that has been referenced. So I do want people to see that for whatever reason, some of the Republican voters are choosing not to vote for Donald Trump and are choosing to vote for RFK Jr. for whatever reason, right? You'd have to talk to them to find out why that is. Now, I want to look at something a little bit different. Let's pretend Donald Trump and Joe Biden are the only candidates. Let's pretend they are the only candidates. And let's pretend that we'll start with Wisconsin. So these are the battleground states. These are the states that we want to pay attention to. Let's click on Wisconsin because I want to show you what happens when you remove RFK from the race. Look at this. When you remove RFK Jr. from this race, now this is going through, I think the average for May 13th. Look at this. Notice you'll see that Trump leads. It's still close, but according to the RCP average, Trump leads in Wisconsin without RFK Jr. Remember, in the video that we saw earlier, with RFK Jr. added to the Wisconsin ballot, Biden actually leads in Wisconsin. So think about that for a second, right? There was a Quinnipiac poll back in early May that showed Joe Biden winning Wisconsin by winning Wisconsin. He had increased by 6 points there. But then since then, there was a tie between Biden and Trump. And then you can see Trump somehow has taken the lead again, still very close. Now, that is Wisconsin. If you look at this, Wisconsin, this day in history, June 7th, 2020, Biden had plus 3.4. June 7th, 2016, Hillary Clinton had plus 11.6. What does that tell you about the direction the country is going in? What does that tell you about how Democrat voters are feeling? Number one, that probably says that there are more voters that have left the Democratic Party, and they may sit this whole thing out. In fact, most people will not show up. Most people that I've spoken to anyway. So there's that. But how do you go from Hillary Clinton leading in Wisconsin on this day by plus 11.6, then to Biden by plus 3.4 in 2020, and now Trump is leading in Wisconsin on this same day? So there is a shift that is happening. Now let's go back here. Well, let me go back. Okay. We're not going to do Arizona. I told you I predicted Arizona would be red. I think that's an easy one. I said the same thing about Georgia. Trump is also leading there in Georgia. Again, this is the date for June 7th. We are going to go to Michigan. Michigan, without RFK Jr., you will see again here, the RCP average is giving this state to Donald Trump. So again, for all of their complaining, the complaining from Morning Joe, the polls are clearly showing you right now that if RFK Jr. were to drop out of this race, that Trump would jump ahead in those states. Without RFK Jr., Biden's numbers decrease. So they're complaining, but right now they might want to be quiet a little bit, right? Just a little bit. And the other one I wanted to look at is Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, without RFK Jr., the RCP average gives it to Trump. And it says that's an increase plus 2.3 for Trump without RFK Jr. With RFK Jr., Biden is actually leading in Pennsylvania. And I want to take you back again on this day. In 2016, Hillary Clinton had plus 5.3. In 2020, Biden had plus 4.0 on this day. So it shows you that something is happening with the Democratic Party, more so Democrat voters. More people are leaving the Democratic Party, or they're just not interested this time around. The economy is a big issue for a lot of people. And also, again, we can't pretend that foreign policy is not playing a part in this at all, because the war in Gaza is on a lot of people's eyes. Obviously, we've had massive protests all over the entire world. So this is a factor. Someone said it not too long ago that Gaza is, I think it was Bernie who said this, Gaza is Joe Biden's Vietnam. That's where we're at, folks. So for all the people who are complaining and mad, all the liberals who are mad that RFK Jr. is in this race, you may want to just knock on their door and remind them that RFK Jr. stepping out of this race right now actually pulls Trump back up in the lead. So there's that. Interesting, huh? Interesting. All right, let's go to some of the comments here. Pull this back here. Thank you for the super chat, Sparky. Admit it, Sabby. Like Katie Halper, you saw Brie as a rival for my love. So kind of liked that she was fired. Just kidding. A rival for my love? What? What is happening here? Too bad about Brie. Katie was fired from the Hill for the same reason. Yeah, we'll get into that. Sonny said, let's hope RFK voters jumped over to Jill Stein's way. It'll be interesting to see where they went, right? That they just decide not to participate at all, or it'll be interesting to see. 21 Degrassi, I wonder how well RFK will do. We'll see. As we get closer to November, we'll have a better idea. Thank you, Tim, though. Protect our Black queens. Protect Bree, period. And I think RFK lost a lot of Trump supporters who were on the fence once the verdict came out. I don't know. Ooh, that's a good point too, Tim. Interesting. Thank you, Sparky. If RFK Jr. had listened to Jimmy Dore and not drove hard in the paint for Zionism, he'd be up there with Trump in the polls. Well, RFK Jr. didn't listen to anyone about that issue that is pro-Palestinian. Anyone. He won't even have conversations with people about it. He wouldn't even have the conversation with Max Blumenthal about it after he said publicly that he would. Thank you, Tim. Funding a genocide, Joe, is a threat to democracy. And thank you, Roger. If they're not polling EC voters, then it don't matter. Electoral college voters. That's a good point as well, Roger. All right, let me get the comment there on Rockfin. Thank you. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Linda. Maybe now Biden will give Kennedy Secret Service protection. I doubt it. I doubt it. I think if he wanted to, he would have done that already. I think that was kind of Biden's way to get him to get out of the race, to be honest. I'm not going to give you Secret Service protection so you can just walk away, right? It's a bully tactic, basically. Again, you ain't got to vote for him, but that was ridiculous. Interesting time, folks. Interesting times. All right, guys, if you haven't had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. And we're moving on to our next story here. Israel has yet again killed civilians in Gaza. Now, this is not in reference to the tent strike that happened a couple of days ago. Israel also has bombed a UN school in Gaza. Now, they are saying that there were Hamas soldiers there, is what they're saying. They're saying, again, these are their words. They are saying that they believe that this was a Hamas command operation and that they actually had targeted a good number of them. I call BS whatever, and I don't care if it was 10 kids, if it was 15 kids, if it was one kid. One child is too many. That's the way that I look at it. Let's get into this clip here about Israel striking the UN school.
After an Israeli strike killed dozens of Gazans sheltering in an UNRWA-run school on Wednesday, Israel maintains that the school in question was a legitimate target.
Our precise strike was based on concrete intelligence from multiple sources. The terrorists inside the school were planning more attacks against Israelis, some of them imminent. We stopped a ticking time bomb.
Adding that some.
So we'll stop it there. But this guy here, first of all, again, how do they know that? How do they know that? They never tell you how they know for certain who is there. Now, if they claim that they have this intelligence, we saw this with the woman that was arguing with Piers Morgan, that they have this intelligence that they are able to tell and to know exactly where Hamas is at that point in time, then why don't they have that same intelligence that can tell them where the civilians are at that point in time, right? So that's why Piers Morgan called her bluff on that, because that was just ridiculous. Now, the State Department is running cover for Israel once again. They alternate between the faces. It can be John Kirby. It can be the guy that people think looks like Sagar. It can also be Matt Miller. In this case, it is Matt Miller. And watch Matt Miller. We're going to pay close attention to the words that he uses, because Matt Miller is still trying to run cover for Israel. At the same time, he's trying to make it seem like we do care about civilian casualties, but he also has a slip up. And I want you to focus on how he puts a lot of attention on the numbers that Israel says they have killed. Listen to this. Matt Miller here from the State Department.
And then can I ask, on this deadly Israeli strike on a school that was housing IDPs in Gaza, what's your response to that?
So we have been in contact with the government of Israel about this strike. They have said to us essentially what they have said publicly, which is that, and this is their claim, that they were targeting 20 to 30 members of Hamas and other militant groups, that they used precision strike to target only one part of the building without hitting areas where civilians were sheltering. At the same time, we've seen the reports on the ground. We've seen the videos from the ground. We've seen the claims that 14 children were killed in this strike. And certainly when you see, if that is accurate, that 14 children were killed, those aren't terrorists. And so...
Pause. Pay attention to what he just did there. So he said, if it is accurate that 14 children were killed. Notice when it's the Palestinian casualties, there's always that if it were accurate, right? But the State Department did not question the numbers on October 7th in reference to Israeli casualties. And those numbers were wrong. If you remember, they said it was 1,400. Notice that number dropped from 1,400 to 1,200. But the State Department didn't question the number of casualties when it applied to people that were Israeli. It's only when it applies to the Palestinians where they have to question whether or not the number is accurate. Pay attention to that.
The government of Israel has said that they are going to release more information about this strike, including the names of those who died in it. We expect them to be fully transparent in making that information public.
Were U.S. weapons used in this strike?
I don't have any update to that. I'd refer to the government of Israel to that
Last
question.
question, how does this not cross the red line that the president laid out, several weeks ago? This is the second incident in less than 2 weeks where we've seen a pretty large civilian toll on what was supposed to be a precision strike.
So with respect to the policy that the president announced, he was speaking specifically to a large-scale operation in Rafah, and we have not yet seen a large-scale operation conducted in Rafah. That said,
so you see what's happening now, right? So that journalist is asking him about the red line that Joe Biden had, right? The red line that Joe Biden had. Every time this is brought up, he brings it back to, well, Joe Biden was talking about a full-scale operation. Let me tell you what he's actually saying under the radar. What they're really telling you, if you read through the lines, is that they are totally fine with Israel killing Palestinian civilians as long as it's not a full-scale ground operation. Did anybody else pick up on that? That is essentially what Joe Biden is saying without saying those words. So when Matt Miller, this is the puppet that they use for the State Department, when Matt Miller comes to these press briefings and he tells everybody that, well, this isn't a full-scale ground operation, He's not going to add to that statement, so it's okay. But that's exactly what they're telling you, people. As long as Israel has not done a full-scale ground operation, the Biden administration is perfectly fine with Israel killing civilians. I can't be more blunt about it than that. But that is the way that it needs to be said. And every time that you see Joe Biden give a speech, that is just a photo op. That is just for optics. He does not care about the Palestinian people. If he cared about the Palestinian people, he would stop giving the arms to Israel. If he cared about the Palestinian people, he would not be okay with this attack that happened at the UN school, the attack that happened at the Rafah refugee camp, the other attacks that have happened at Rafah refugee camps. He would not be okay with that. You don't say you have a problem with this and you keep giving the enemy the tools that they need for destruction. Got to pay attention to these things.
We have seen strikes that put civilians in danger well before the president said that, and we have made clear to the government of Israel that we expect them to do everything that they can to minimize civilian harm. We've been through this before. It applies in this situation too. It is a difficult situation if it is true that you have this site where Hamas is hiding inside a school, other militants are hiding inside a school. Those individuals are legitimate targets, but at the same time, they're embedded near civilians. Israel has a right to try and target those civilians, but they also have the obligation to minimize civilian harm and take every...
I want you to pay attention to what he just said, because he has a Freudian slip. That's why I put the captions on. We're just going to go back just a little bit. Listen to what he says Israel has a right to do.
Do everything that they can to minimize civilian harm. We've been through this before. It applies in this situation too. It is a difficult situation if it is true that you have this site where Hamas is hiding inside a school, other militants are hiding inside a school. Those individuals are legitimate targets, but at the same time, they're embedded near civilians. Israel has a right to try and target those civilians, but they also...
That's right, Frank. Frank caught it. He said target civilians. I'm surprised no one in the room in the press briefing caught that. Or maybe they did and they didn't get a chance to respond. He said Israel has a right to target those civilians. Everybody catch that? Obviously a Freudian slip.
Have the obligation to minimize civilian harm and take every step possible to minimize civilian harm. So that's why we were pressing the government of Israel and the IDF to be completely transparent about what happened here. We want to know the facts as much as anyone.
Have they taken every step possible?
We have seen them take improvements over time, but still, if it bears true that this strike resulted in the death of 14 children, the results aren't where they need to be. So it gets back to this question of intent and results. Even if the intent is what the IDF has said publicly, that they were trying to use a precision strike just to target 20 to 30 militants. If you have seen 14 children die in that strike, that shows that something went wrong. That said, these are all facts that need to be verified, and that's what we want to see happen.
This is a game. This is a game. When he tells you that, well, these are all facts that need to be verified. It's wrong if Israel killed 14. Notice it's always an if. It's always an if. We're waiting for an investigation where they wait for Israel to investigate itself. Because what could go wrong with that? Who tells on themselves? Do police departments tell on themselves when they have internal investigations? Right? Do they tell on themselves? No, I don't think so. So this is a game, ladies and gentlemen. The State Department is here to convince people that Israel has a right to defend itself, and Israel says that they are doing targeted attacks. That being said, they're saying that civilians have been killed. And if that is true, and we'll have to have an independent investigation to verify that, but that is not okay. But Israel has a right to defend itself. This is a game. This is a game. They are giving Israel the green light to kill as many Palestinians as they want to. And all Israel has to do is to continue to say these two things. One, they have a right to defend themselves and they're trying to take out Hamas. And two, they are making targeted strikes. That's all they have to do. Same game every time.
Go ahead, Simon. I'll come to you, Simon.
To follow up on the broader issue of civilian harm, so we had this NSM process that came to an end, and you came to these specific conclusions that didn't lead to any impact on provision of arms to Israel. Now that kind of 90-day process with the NSM is finished, I guess there's an annual NSM requirement for you. But just to sort of be clear, as of now, what kind of are there any timelines you can give on when you're going to be able to make conclusions regarding Israel's conduct? You know, is there a date when all of these, or at least some of the assessments that you've been making since the beginning of the war might be completed and you can actually make a definitive?
There's not a definitive date I can give you standing here today. I can tell you that there are a number of reviews going on of specific incidents, and those continue. As we said, or as the report said, the NSM 20 report that we released, it's often difficult to come to definitive conclusions in the middle of the war where we don't have access to information on the ground. Doesn't mean it's impossible. We look at it, we sort through it, we take all the information that we can and try to use that to make our best judgments, but it does make it difficult. So that said, we have a number of these reviews going on. We want to see them wrapped up as soon as they can, but they're difficult and time consuming. You have to look at facts, and sometimes you have to make legal determinations as well that are informed by those facts, and that's what we continue to do.
It's not that time consuming. It's not that time consuming. This is a way, and I'll be very honest with you guys, this is a way for them to continue to drag this out, which I predicted they've been trying to do for quite some time. They're trying to drag this war out into the election. And why is because one of the things that politicians have been known to run on before during wartime is that, well, you don't want to elect someone else in the office when we're in the middle of a war. Joe Biden has us in how many conflicts right now? You have the Russia-Ukraine conflict. We also have the war in Gaza, right? Now there's conflict between Israel and Lebanon as well. They're going back and forth between Israel and Hezbollah. There's so many things that are happening. So one of the advantages that the Democratic Party, I believe, is going to try to use is that why on earth would you elect someone else to come into office at this point in time when we have this conflict going, this foreign policy issue going right now? That is something that they will use to try to convince voters you need to keep this in Biden's hands. I've seen this happen before. It happened under George W. Bush. That was one of the excuses that the Republican Party used under George W. Bush. Now, I want to fast forward to this piece here for the press briefing.
Sources of information to determine that.
I'm sorry if you covered this before, but I mean, how are you going to know if the list of names that they release is accurate?
So we will. I don't want to prejudge.
I could make up a bunch of names right now. And
it is a good question.
That doesn't necessarily mean that those were actually the people who were killed, or that they were militant.
Yeah, it is a good question.
So we'll get to that in a second. So what he is asking Matt Miller is he's questioning Israel's intentions here. So Israel said that they would release the names of those that were killed to prove to the U.S. government that they actually did kill Hamas fighters. But to the point, the journalist who you can't see that's in the audience, to his point, how do you know that those names are real? So the journalist in the audience said, I can make up a list of names right now, which is very true, which is probably what Israel will do. We trust Israel to come up with the names of the people that they said that they killed to prove that they were only trying to target the Hamas fighters. You don't know if those names are real. They could come up with anything to protect themselves. This is a joke.
Question. We'll wait and see what it is they release, and if they release any information to back that up. It could be that they really, I don't want to speculate to what they could release to back that up, but we will wait and see what it looks like.
All right, but if it turns out that they name these people and they are confirmed to have been militants, and you are able to, or there's some kind of confirmation that they are in fact the ones who were hit, is that enough for you, even if they don't go into any civilian?
So we also want to
whether
see
they're identified
no.
by the Israelis or not.
We
it's clear that there were.
Well, we also want to see the civilian harm and look at what exactly happened and have a full understanding of that. We've seen the initial reports, but we want to fully understand that. And then the Israelis should want to fully understand that too. They have said that they want to minimize civilian harm. We've impressed upon them the importance of that, so they should want to know that information too.
And I apologize.
So he says that the Israelis have said, mainly the IDF said, they want to minimize civilian harm. And we're supposed to believe that. If they wanted to, let's take combat out of it for just a second. If they wanted to minimize civilian harm, why were they blocking humanitarian aid from getting in, feeding those people? If they wanted to minimize civilian casualties, because civilian casualties are not just happening because of combat. There are people that died in Gaza because they starved to death. Not everyone has been hit. So the fact that he could even stand there and say that, knowing damn well that there were video footage showing Israel blocking the food from coming in, or other videos showing them taking the food off the trucks and throwing it away, lighting it on fire. This is why you can't have me in that press briefing room with him, because I would ask that question. How can you stand there and try to convince the American people that they want to minimize civilian casualties when they were blocking the food from getting into the people?
Because maybe I missed this while I ran out, but did they say that they would go into the details on any civilians who were killed?
They have made clear initially that they would release information about it. I don't have the full details about what they would say,
but as far as what you understand, they've said that they will release the names of the militants
and other details. I don't know what those details will include because they haven't done that yet. So, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on what Simon was asking about the State Department's own internal assessments after the NSM had concluded. The Secretary said in one of his Hill testimonies a few weeks ago, I think it was Senate Appropriations, he was asked about state's own internal assessments about Israel's actions, and he was also asked if the State Department has the kind of resources that it needs to meet the objective of carrying out its own internal assessments. And the Secretary, sorry if my notes are a little bit rough here, but he had said, it's a very good question, and it's something we're looking at very hard, and that it's something that in order to do it in real time, the answer is probably no, and that it's an incredibly labor-intensive process. Yeah. He indicated that the State Department doesn't have the resources it needs to get this done quickly or efficiently. Can you just clarify if that's the case? Because Simon was asking about when we might get some kind of conclusions on some of these cases.
It is.
So basically she's saying the State Department, or she was told the State Department doesn't have the resources to actually get this information quickly. They don't have the resources.
Yeah, it is the case that it is difficult to review the sheer number of incidents in real time and provide with definitive answers on all of them in any kind of compressed time frame. It is one of the challenges we face. If you just look at the sheer number of casualties in the war in Gaza and of course the sheer number of civilian casualties, there are a number of specific incidents that we have felt obligated to look at, and certainly we would welcome additional resources. That we haven't made an official request to Congress yet. It's something that is the type of thing we go through in our usual budgeting process, but certainly we would welcome more resources to look at these issues.
We'll go ahead and stop it there. But I think you guys see what's happening. Now they're trying to use the excuse that the State Department doesn't have enough resources to get this information quickly. Another excuse for them to continue to drag out this conflict. And I don't buy it. You have a defense budget that's over $860 billion. You guys are throwing billions of dollars to Ukraine. You're giving Israel $3.8 billion a year. And that was before October 7th. And I'm supposed to believe that you don't have enough resources. Sounds like you need to budget differently. That's what that sounds like to me. And again, How can we forget, right? How can we forget the Freudian slip here? You can't leave without this.
They're embedded near civilians. Israel has a right to try and target those civilians, but they also have the obligation to minimize civilian harm and take every step possible to minimize civilian harm. So that's why they're embedded near civilians. Israel has a right to try and target those civilians, but they also have the obligation to minimize civilian harm and take every step possible to minimize civilian harm. So
Israel has a right to target those civilians, he said. Terrible, right? Terrible. That was Matt Miller from the State Department. And you know what I think of when I see Matt? When I see Matt, because he's had protesters outside of his home as well. Not just Antony Blinken. Matt Miller, if you follow Code Pink on Twitter, they have also protested outside of his house. And it looks like, from what I've seen, Matt has a really nice house. So what these puppets do, like Matt Miller and John Kirby and the guy that people think looks like Sagar, I say that the people think because Sagar said on Twitter that that guy does not look like him. But these puppets get up on stage at these press briefings. They tell the press a bunch of BS. This script was already probably written before they arrived to the podium. They're already told what to say. All these lies every day. And then they're able to cope with it because at the end of the day, they leave and they go home to their fancy house with their nice car and their fancy lifestyle and their family. Could you imagine being Matt Miller's kid? Could you imagine being John Kirby's kid? Could you imagine if John Kirby was your dad and let's say you were a teenager or you were in college and you knew the truth about the creation of Israel and you knew the truth about what's happened to the Palestinian people? Could you imagine? How would you feel? How would you feel? I would be embarrassed. I would be embarrassed. Let's go to some of the comments here. Aye. Thank you for the super chat, Raphael. Remember this by September, Biden and Trump will both be removed by the party. We're going to have 2 new rational and young candidates put in place. Interesting, Raphael. You're piquing my interest here. That is very interesting. Thank you, Grapeseed. Did anyone see the Sky News Australia video where the guy said the KKK doesn't exist in response to Briahna? Blatant lie they're broadcasting. Yeah, Sky News is cringe. Cringe. We're going to get into the Bree story. Thank you, Tim. Send Joe Biden, Lindsey Graham, and all of Congress kids to Gaza and let's see how quick they label it a genocide. Disgusting. I'm livid with our government. New York Varsity said, showed his whole ass. That's right. That's right. He did. Thank you, Courtney. My apologies for commenting late on the subject. RFK lost Trump voters when, in an interview, he talked as if he was falling back on his stance against gender affirming care for minors. Interesting. I didn't see that interview. I'll have to look for that. That is interesting, Courtney. Thank you, Tim. Occupiers don't have the right to defend themselves from the occupied intifada. This has radicalized me. Tear it all down. Sick of this. Yeah, only Israel has the right to defend itself. Eartha, I am just learning the true history of Israel. So disappointed, hurting. It hits you right there, right? When you first find out. Thank you for the super chat. Lee, love you. I think you mean Sabby. Love you, Sabby. Thank you so much. Oh, and thank you for this one as well. Love you. Thank you. Very sweet. Very sweet times. We're going to get into our final story of the night. Here's something that happened that is not so sweet. Right? Not so sweet at all. In case you have not heard, Briahna Joy Gray has been fired from The Hill Rising. In fact, she announced this on Twitter and she, Bree actually dropped the receipts to show this as well. It finally happened. The Hill has fired me. There should be no doubt that the Rising has a clear pattern of suppressing speech, particularly when it's critical of the state of Israel. This is why they fired Katie Halper, and it was only a matter of time before they fired me. So let's take a look at this letter here. June 6, 2024, R.E. Briahna Joy Gray. First of all, the first thing I noticed about this piece of communication, it's obvious they don't even know how to spell Brianna's name properly. And she's been working with you for how long and you can't even spell her name correctly? That just goes to show you how much they were paying attention. Bri is on your show, what, Monday through Thursday, at least? Every morning, Monday through Thursday? Her name is literally on the screen. And you don't know how to spell her name? They misspelled it twice. Dear Briahna Joy, this is 30 days written notice that your consulting services agreement is being terminated pursuant to the provisions of Section 5.3 for convenience. Thank you for your contributions, and we wish the best in your future endeavors. Sincerely yours, Nexstar Media. This letter is corporate as hell. It's so corporate, so corporate. You misspelled her name, and then you say, in pursuant to the provisions of Section 5.3 for convenience. Very corporate, which is what Rising is. Right? Now, I do want to add this part that Bri posted as well. Also, to be clear, Robbie did not know, has objected, and shouldn't be blamed. So I did want to make sure I shared that as well, because I know a number of you probably were like, that damn Robbie. But according to Bri, he does not agree with this. He was not on the show today, but I think usually he's not on Fridays anyway. But according to her, he is not in agreement with what has happened. Now, we knew, or I think most of us had a feeling that this was coming. And it's not just because of the interview that I'm going to show you. A lot of people are saying this is the reason. No, it's usually not one incident, right? It's usually other things that lead up to something. And then eventually they say, this is the final straw. You gotta go. Rising has a history of censoring speech. We'll get into that in just a second so you can see how they censored other people that were co-hosts on the show. But in particular, Bri's position when it comes to Israel and Gaza, which is similar to a lot of us, I would think, watching this show in particular. Like, I have the same position on Israel and Gaza that Bri does. It was very clear that Rising was not too comfortable after October 7th with some of the things that have been said on the show. I don't know if it was just audience members, which I would say a lot of the audience members agreed with Bri when it came to what was happening to the Palestinian people. But it was very clear that there were some things happening behind the scenes, which I'm going to show you later on as well. But we knew that it was coming. At least I had a feeling that this was going to happen because there was the smear piece that was written about Briahna Joy Gray from the Daily Beast, similar to a smear piece that was written about Kim Iverson when she was a co-host on The Hill. So the Daily Beast puts out these smear pieces about the co-hosts on Rising. And in both of those smear pieces, they said that there are disagreements with the staff. They said that about Kim. They said that about Bri. And that was last year. So I knew, I had a feeling that this was coming. And I wondered how long Bri was going to stay at Rising. I was wondering if she was going to choose to leave at some point or another. But they did fire her. And a lot of people are pointing to this interview here where Briahna Joy Gray interviewed a sister of one of the hostages. And people are saying that this is the interview that made them put their foot down. Let's get into parts of this. There's two parts of this that I want to show you. And then we're going to go into some other receipts as well.
Can't sleep at night. Can't even drink a sip of water because I know that my sister is drinking salt water from the sea, that she's not getting food and the terrorist is eating in front of her face.
Yeah, Yarden, I really hope your sister does get water and food, and I hope that
I'm sure you're aware of the ample reporting of Israel blocking aid, food and water to Gaza in a way that is hurting both the people of Gaza and the hostages, right?
Most of the trucks are getting inside Gaza. I don't know if you saw, but Hamas is blocking them from them civilians. They're
So I think part of the reason why Bree became frustrated during this interview was because this young woman was spewing a lot of propaganda. I mean, we've all seen the video footage of the IDF soldiers throwing humanitarian aid in the water, setting it on fire, sending in roadblocks to prevent the trucks of humanitarian aid from getting through to the people in Gaza. And what does she mention? She mentions, oh, it's Hamas who's preventing this from getting to the people. There's a sense of brainwashing. It seems to run very deep, seems to be very deep rooted here, where whatever the Israeli government tells you is like, you're just supposed to believe it and go along with it and just repeat the talking points and not question and think for yourself when there's video footage right there in front of you and you can't believe your own eyes. So she was repeating those talking points. And I think this is part of the reason why Bree started to get annoyed. And then there's something else that happened.
Not giving their own civilians the humanitarian aid that everyone is so eager to give them. And I'm not against that. I'm a nurse in my profession. I really, truly believe that everyone should live in safety, in health. This is one of the biggest crises that we ever experienced here. But I'm really feeling that everyone is taking care of the Gaza civilians like they should. But what about the hostages? Why
let's talk about how to get the hostages home. I agree.
No, please let me finish. Why aren't the Red Cross is entering the hostages? Why aren't they giving them medications? My sister have a lot of chronic diseases. Why aren't she getting anything? And we know that they didn't get anything.
So first of all, to her point there about the Red Cross, let's talk about the Red Cross really briefly, shall we? Honey, I could have told you if you talk to people that lived in New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina, the Red Cross did not come through. If you talk to people that lived in Haiti after the earthquake, the Red Cross did not really come through. The Red Cross has been known to pocket money, and this is why I tell you, do not donate money to the Red Cross. Millions of dollars that they got for Haiti. What did they do with all that money? Oh, we built like 5 houses. That's it? With millions of dollars in Haiti? Ask people that lived in New Orleans what happened with the Red Cross during Hurricane Katrina. So there's that. Right? So it was very clear during this interview, she is not willing to put blame when it comes to the humanitarian aid. She is not willing to put the blame on the IDF, who were not allowing the aid to come through. That was not Hamas. That was the IDF. And the only way that you pretend that did not happen, or you choose to unsee it, is if you are deeply brainwashed and you have been convinced that everything that Israel does is right and everything that happens in Gaza is wrong. And a lot of people have been conditioned to do this in Israel. That's part of the problem. That's part of it with that interview. There are more things that she said. We're not going to get into all that. It'll drive you crazy. And then there was this part towards the end, this epic moment.
I really do hope that Netanyahu agrees and Israel agrees to the ceasefire deal that could bring all the hostages, including your sister, home. And I'm sure many people watching are praying for her safety.
Thank you. Me too. And I really hope that you specifically will believe women when they say that they got hurt.
All right. Thanks for joining. Stick around. More Rising coming up next.
So the moment there that people are pointing out is that Bree rolled her eyes when she said, believe women. Look, I can go back to the interview that Bree did on Bad Faith when she was talking to, I think, a former State Department official when he said, the women and children in reference to Ukraine, and people were picking on her then. The NAFO trolls on Twitter were picking on her, saying she rolled her eyes at the death of children. You know, interesting how some of those same people are doing a lot more than rolling their eyes when it comes to the death of Palestinian children, but that's another issue. But the reason why this is happening, the reason why Bree obviously rolled her eyes is because it is a BS talking point. You know, it's believe women unless it's women that you don't like, or if it's women that are a certain race or a certain ethnicity, or they're a part of a certain political party. It's believe women until it's Tara Reid. Hello? Can we say it again? It's believe women until it's Tara Reid, right? It's believe women until it's the Palestinian women that have complained about being assaulted by the IDF. It's believe women until it's someone that you don't like. That is why I believe she rolled her eyes. Not to mention that story, the New York Times article, has been debunked over and over again by other outlets that there was no proof, no evidence that that even happened on October 7th. You tell me why the New York Times decided to fire the so-called journalist after they got heat for that article, who, by the way, was a former IDF soldier. Just happened to become a journalist after October 7th. Okay. I'm going to tell you what I think of this. Because some people may have seen this interview and they said, well, you know, it's good that they interviewed, you know, one of the sisters of the hostages. And I don't think that anyone should be censored. But my little wheels are turning, the wheels are turning, and my spotty senses went off. I told you guys when I talked about this last night, I touched on it a little bit, but I said I did not see the interview, so I didn't want to cover the story last night until I saw the interview. So that's why I'm covering this tonight. So I saw this interview. I watched the full thing. In my little spotty senses, it gives me the impression, I almost feel like this interview was a setup. I almost feel like this was a trap. It's kind of like if you've ever worked for an employer before and you kind of know that your time is almost up. You know, a lot of times when people are about to get fired, you kind of get that feeling. You kind of know that they're going to fire you. I've had former coworkers say this to me, by the way. I've had former coworkers tell me, I think I'm going to get fired. So they kind of, you know, will let you know they're not really feeling you, or they got issues with what you're doing and that kind of thing. Maybe they start to be a little bit more critical of you than usual, those types of things. So you kind of get this feeling that you're about to get fired. I kind of feel like this interview was a trap. I kind of feel like somebody, maybe someone at Rising decided, oh, let's do this interview and get Bree and Robbie to do this interview. Because the reality is Bree didn't have to do this interview. Robbie could have just done this interview. This interview could have happened today, maybe, right? Maybe the other co-host on Rising could have done this interview. But I think this may have been done on purpose to get Briahna Joy Gray pushed out. That's just what my spidey senses tell me. It's a feeling. It's a Pisces thing. So that's the feeling that I'm getting. We can go to the second part for type VNC, Corey or Eric, when you're ready. That's the feeling that I'm getting. So that's why I didn't want to cover it last night, right? Okay. So she said, believe women, right? Peep this, fam. Did you know about this? So this was just announced. Just announced, right? There is a New York Times article that was just announced titled Inside the Base Where Israel Has Detained Thousands of Gazans. And I'm not going to read it to you because it is too graphic, but he summed up some things here that I'll swap out some of the words. Israel is SAing kidnapped Gazans in the team in prison camp. A Gazan died after penetration by electric stick. A female IDF officer ordered the assault of a senior Gazan nurse, a UN worker forced to sit on a hot metal stick. This is the fourth report of IDF SA this year, and it's a full thread. We're not going to go into the whole thing, but you can read that article from the New York Times. Shout out to Mohammed Shahada for sharing that. So it's believe women until it's those women, right? I don't hear them talking about that. But this didn't start with Bree. She wasn't the first co-host on Rising to be censored and pushed out. We're going to take a little walk in the past. We're going to show you when it happened to Kim. I'm going to show you when it happened to Katie. And then we're going to fast forward and I'm going to show you some other things that have happened with this firing. The first person I remember it happening to was Kim Iverson. It wasn't over Israel. It was over Dr. Fauci. Does everybody remember this? Okay. Let's go back. Kim came on the show to talk about this. Peep this, fam.
Morning. As I'm getting ready to join the show, I get a phone call again from the executive producer, who was the one that called me the night before. And she just said, you know, hey, we talked about this. I ran this kind of up the chain. We discussed this. And we've decided we're just going to go ahead with the Fauci interview as is. We're not going back to the Fauci team. We're not saying anything to them. And I just said, so you want me to come on and record a couple of segments and then you want me to leave so that you guys can interview Fauci? Like, let me get this straight. Like, that's what you're asking of me. And I've been telling the audience for the last year that I'm not censored, that I'm not hindered, that I'm not held back, that yes, I joined corporate media after being an independent person on my own channel for a long time. And then I joined corporate media and I promised the audience that I was not being censored, held back, or you know, any of that goes on in corporate media. How am I supposed to go back to the audience and say, and make that claim anymore after this? Like, because you guys won't go and tell Fauci's team that I'm a host of this show, bottom line.
Right.
And, you know, I just told them the audience won't trust you. The audience won't trust me. There's no way for me to spin this, you know, to make this sound better than it is. And I don't think I can stick around with that. This will be reputation ruining for both of us. And they went ahead. I tried to get them to stop after that conversation. There were still 2 hours in between that conversation. And when Fauci was to appear, I screamed fire over and over at everybody. Like, I was like, guys, stop. Don't do this. Don't do this. I like messaged every producer. I slacked the whole team. I emailed the general manager.
She said slacked, not slapped. I just want to let people know that that's slacked. So it's Slack, the app Slack. It's like a communication app.
I mean, I just went try to get them to not. And then when they did the interview, I just begged them not to air it. I just said, guys, don't air it. Don't do this to yourselves. Don't do this to me. Just don't do it. Because I can't come back and be here a part of this if this goes on, because I promised my audience that I would not be censored or held back or limited in any way. And this clearly is that. That is what's happening here. So they made their choice.
They did. They made their choice. Kim, who was probably the most based, most well-researched co-host on Rising about the pandemic, like that was her jam. Okay. Like everybody kind of has their, their spot where they kill it. That was her thing. Whether you agreed with her positions or not, she always backed it up with research. And some people I think should go and give Kim an apology, because I remember a lot of people were smearing her back then. And now we see that Fauci saying some of those same things that Kim was saying back then. She did her research. And out of all the people, the person who was the most knowledgeable about that issue, they pulled her from the interview. They wouldn't let her interview Fauci. She had the most views. Do you guys realize how many viewers she brought over to Rising? Her radars went viral. So first it was Kim. Because see, Sabby remember. Pepperidge Farm remembers. Then it was Katie. Remember they got to get rid of Katie? Because of Israel. Because Katie prepared a radar where she was going to talk about Israeli apartheid. And they didn't like that. Katie came on and we talked about this as well. I was like, damn, because for a while it was starting to become a thing where everybody was getting removed. All these people were getting removed from the Hill. And this is kind of like, what is happening? What is happening, right? Listen to what Katie said. So one of the things that I think a lot of us were disappointed to see is that you did not get the opportunity to, air your story about Israel and Palestine on the Hill's Rising. But I did get to see it on, I think it was Breakthrough News feature it on there. So I did get to see it and I thought it was very informative. Thanks. And I think back to if only that would have happened on Rising because it's over 1 million subscribers. Yeah. And I've seen some of the comments since this topic has been covered that is very clear to me that a lot of people are just really not aware of the history and what's been happening in Israel. So it's unfortunate that you didn't get that opportunity to air that story because I think it would have been very educational for people. But the question I have is that, do you think, looking back on it, if you did get to feature that story on Rising, do you think it would have made a difference considering where we are today with the war?
Maybe. I mean, maybe more people would have been able to see through Israel's propaganda once they realized that all their talk of being a beacon of democracy was actually just garbage and not true. I think, I'd like to think that maybe people seeing that would make them more critical and questioning of what Israel says and what Israel does, and realizes that when they say they're doing things in the name of democracy, they're not. So, yeah. But I want to give Brie a shout out for fighting the good fight. I think one of the things is that because I made a noise about them not letting me do that monologue, and then they banned me and fired me and pretended it was not for ideological reasons, that makes it, I think, that much harder for them to censor. I think that means that Brie can be strong on this issue without facing consequences, hopefully. Because
unfortunately, though, they made Brie face those consequences as well, as we saw, right? But I think everyone needs to remember, when Katie prepared that monologue, that was before October 7th. And that's why I asked that question, because I felt like if Katie would have gotten the opportunity to share that monologue on Rising, again, they have over 1 million subscribers. When October 7th happened, I feel like more people would have been educated about what was happening in Israel. And that's what pissed me off. And then October 7th happened. Right? But unfortunately, they did end up penalizing Brie for this as well. But it was Kim Iverson, Katie Halper. And I told you it did not start with that interview. Remember, it was just a couple days ago. We covered the debate that Brie had with that panel of Zionists, right? And she was heavily attacked on Twitter after that debate. Days after that debate, weeks after that debate. I think that debate happened a couple weeks ago, but the video was posted later or something like that for whatever reason. But they were attacking her. They were calling her. In fact, you could see when the smear campaign really began. The smear campaign didn't begin after that interview. The smear campaign began after that debate. Now you'll see here, this was Constantine. He said, "No one cares about your race, Briahna. This isn't Harvard." Now, what is he responding to? She said, "This is from the neutral moderator of a debate on Israel's genocide in Gaza. You simply cannot argue with racists. On the upside, they will expose themselves." He called her DEI Barbie on Twitter. He said, DEI Barbie is upset. And I got something to say about this as well. People are starting to throw around the DEI term towards Black people to the point where DEI has basically become the new N-word. Everybody knows this? All Black people, we're all DEI now. How was she DEI? Bree graduated from Harvard Law. Constantine dropped out of college. How was she DEI? Bree was a lawyer. How was she DEI? Because when they throw that at you, what they're telling you is that you're not qualified to do what you're doing. And you were given what you were given because of your race, because you were Black. So he wants you to disregard the fact that she was a Harvard lawyer. He wants you to disregard the fact that she was the press secretary for Bernie Sanders' campaign. She wrote for The Intercept, but she's DEI. See how this has started? This whole everybody, all Black people, we're all DEI now. We all got where we are because we're Black. That's what's happening. Oh, you guys are asking what it is? Oh, I'm sorry. DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion. Sorry, guys. I forget everybody's not on Twitter. But diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that's what they're doing now. Calling her DEI Barbie. So this is when the smears began. This is what I'm trying to tell you. It didn't start with that interview. And so Bree tweeted, "No one cares about your race." She was quoting him. "Sir, you literally just called me DEI Barbie. These Zionists are literally so dumb." So this is what I was trying to tell you. It didn't start with that interview. I think it started after that debate. He was the moderator of that debate. He was the one that said that they wanted Danish people because Danish people are civilized. Blatantly racist words that are used. But Bree lost her job. And Zionists like Constantine that are saying racist remarks to Black people on Twitter, they get to keep their jobs. Everybody remember this. Okay, so when people come to you and they say, don't talk about race, just talk about class, everybody remember this. Because she was being attacked here specifically because he was basically saying that she was not knowledgeable enough to do what she was doing, and it was handed to her because she was Black. Lawyers debate. Any of you have been on the debate team, you know that's kind of where a lot of people started, right? Debate team in high school or sometimes college. Lawyers debate. They argue. That's a big part of their job, winning the argument. That's where it started. That's where the smear campaign started. And they put out their little whistle to everybody. Everyone in the network and everybody in the Zionist network just started attacking her one after another after another. All these accounts that popped up out of nowhere that all of a sudden I ain't never seen on Twitter before. All of a sudden, all these accounts were heavily attacking her. Where all these people come from? I click on the account. It says the account was created June 2024. Coincidence? So they sent out the call. And everybody came in. Fire her. She should be removed. How dare you? And I just thought it was pretty interesting that interview just happened to happen after she was attacked on Twitter for that debate. And that's why my spidey senses make me think that interview was a trap. We'll get into what I think about Rising in just a second. So you got all kind of people smearing her. You got Nomiki Kuntz here. You got Nomiki here, who I forgot existed. And I'm just keeping it real. I totally forgot you were a thing, Nomiki. I remember you used to be on the Majority Report. At one point, you were running for office. I totally forgot who you were for like a year. And here she come out of the woodwork. My people, Bree was a high-paid corporate lawyer until she suddenly and conveniently became a progressive who also echoed our foreign adversaries' reporter disclosed talking points designed to divide the left. She was never our friend. At this point, the reporting is out there. What are you talking about, Nomiki? What are you talking about dividing the left? Didn't you run against a progressive candidate when she was already in the race? What? What? So here is Nomiki trying to use Bree's past against her. She was a high-paid corporate lawyer. What were you? What were you doing before Bernie 2016, Nomiki? This is Nomiki using a purity test. She goes on to say here, look into these people like you never heard of them before and then get back to me. Don't go off of popularity alone. Maybe go back prior to, say, 2017. It wasn't easy to back Bernie in 2016. It was a popularity wagon after. Gives a fuck, Nomiki. Why are you still stuck on Bernie 2016? Did somebody answer this for me? Anybody? Who gives a fuck? What does that have to do with her being fired for criticizing Israel, Nomiki? Everybody got a past. Everybody came from somewhere. Not everybody was aligned. Weren't you working for the Hillary Clinton administration? Weren't you supporting CIA projects in Libya? Okay, so let's talk about what you were doing, Nomiki. So here she come in because she just gotta hate. They all piling on, right? Now let's get into some things about Rising. I told you before that Rising is owned by Nexstar. Nexstar also owns News Nation. Look at something that Max Blumenthal found out. This is pretty interesting. Nexstar, the company that owns The Hill, which censored and fired Katie Halper for a mono on the reality of Israeli apartheid, hired professional Israel lobbyist Jake Novak as deputy editor. And it looks like Max had receipts here. Defending Israel against media bias, presented by news producer Jake Novak. So everybody see this? So now you're seeing the people behind the scenes. Let's go to the other receipt here. News Nation announces key editorial hires and expansion of production facilities in New York and DC. Right down here at the bottom, Jake Novak named deputy managing editor. It's all behind the scenes, right? So the Daily Beast smear piece against Briahna Joy Gray that said there were staffers that were not happy with her content about Israel. Wonder who that could have been. Doesn't necessarily have to be someone working for Rising. Remember, Nexstar owns Rising. And another thing I want to point out as well with Nexstar, we can pull this back up. The Hill Rising is corporate. It's corporate media. It's not independent media. It is what it is. And some people did not know that. Some people thought they were independent. News Nation is also not independent. Nexstar is corporate. Always remember that. It's like they're corporate media, but they try to, they're supposed to try to discuss the stories that independent media may not be willing to discuss. They've had different producers over the years. It was a different team there, from what I understand, when Crystal and Sagar were a part of Rising than it is now. So things have definitely changed. Now, Nico had a really good point when we talk about behavior. Some of the comments that people said to Bree, I can't show you on here because they were using the N-word. There were people calling her the N-word. Zionist calling her the N-word on Twitter. All those kinds of things. Let me show you what Nico said. Not for nothing, But I remember when Robbie lost his mind and literally cussed Bree out on camera, only to return to work the very next day, if I'm not mistaken. But Bree rolls her eyes after being personally attacked and gaslighted for 20 minutes straight, and she's immediately fired. So please tell me again, how is there not a double standard for Black women and women of color in general on camera? Everybody remember that? Everyone remember? I think we talked about on this show when Robbie screamed at Bree and cussed her out and stuff. And what did I tell you then? I said he can get away with it. What people have to remember is that it is a lot harder for Black people in this space. And it's even harder for Black women. I can tell you that from first experience. And what people also have to remember is that had it not been for people like Bree, a lot of us that you saw on Rising, you probably would have never seen on there. Because when Bree became a co-host on Rising, she decided to recommend different voices so that you didn't hear from the same academics. You didn't hear from the same, bougie mainstream media folks. That's how you got to see me on Rising. That's how you got to see Nick, my comrade from RBN, on Rising. That's how you got to see Max Blumenthal. That's how you got to see Pasta. It was Bree who recommended those other voices. These are some of the things people may not realize. You never saw me on that show before Bree was a co-host. Never. And they never reached out before she was a co-host, just in case you were wondering. Not once. She pushed for that. So I think sometimes what people may not understand is that whether you agreed with her positions or not, when she got to that spot, unlike some people, because some people, they worry about themselves. When Bree did get to that spot, she didn't pull up the ladder behind her. And it's easy to do that in this space. A number of you reached out to me and said, you found me because you saw me on Rising. A number of you. But you won't see me on there again. I personally would not feel comfortable going back on Rising because of what has happened. And not just because it happened to Bree, because it's happened to 3 people that I know of. 3. So I personally wouldn't feel comfortable. Why would I feel comfortable now going back? I have the same position on Israel and Gaza as she does. So why would I feel comfortable? I would not. And apparently some of you don't feel comfortable either. Shout out to the gentleman who sent me this earlier today. Last night, I told you, I said, let's look at Rising's numbers and see where they are now. Last night, were at 1.97 million subscribers. They are now, according to Social Blade, we'll go and check the dropout here. I'll make this bigger for the people in the back. Sometimes you got to put on the glasses. According to Social Blade, look at this. Rising gained 10,000 subscribers Wednesday, June 5th. 10,000. They lost 10,000 on Thursday. They have already lost 10,000 subscribers. Now, some of that may be from some of the people may have unsubbed because of they didn't like the interview with the sister of the hostage. Some may have unsubbed from that. But I'm willing to bet, based on the comments I'm about to show you, I'm willing to bet most of the people unsubbed because they fired Bree. Just like people unsubbed when they got rid of Katie. People unsubbed when they got rid of Kim. So they've already lost 10,000 subscribers. So apparently, I guess some of you were pissed off as well. And if you go to this video, the very first one that they dropped today, I'm just going to go to the comments. Roger Meadows is going to laugh at me because he always says, Sab, you say you don't read the comments. I usually don't, but I did today. This video here, Columbia settles elite school caves to students who sued over safety amid Gaza protests. Let's go to the comments. And I forget how they show the comments up here. Eric, can you help me? Can you get to the comments on here? I always forget how to find them on. Oh, here we go. Never mind. Okay. So, fam, these aren't my comments. Look at what people said. The first video they dropped today. I agree. Time to bail on this trash propaganda channel. Robbie fans can catch him on Reason. Here's another one. Unsubscribe. Another one. You guys are not for free speech. Go away. You still did never apologize for Robbie cursing at Briahna multiple times on air. I hope she brings a lawsuit. Unsubscribed. Unsubscribing from the Hill. Firing Bree and I'm no lefty. You fired Bree. I unsubscribe. They fired Briahna, who runs this shit show. Boycott the Hill. Unsubscribe now. Time to rename the new show, Rising Israel. Might as well call this Normie News now. Free Palestine. I can go on and on and on and on and on. Okay. And we'll end with this one, who apparently this person is right wing. Apparently, The Hill has fired / lost Crystal Ball, Saga and Jetty, Kim Iverson, Katie Halper, Briahna Joy Gray. It's time to boycott Rising. So again, the people are not happy. The people are not happy. What is that show going to be like now? I don't know, because I won't be watching it. And I won't be going back on it either. That's for sure. What is that show going to be like? Anybody? Anyone know? Let's look at the views. How did their views? Let's check out their views today. Let's see what happened. Because Rising should be ashamed of itself. I give 0 fucks. I don't know what that was. But let's look at the views and see how their view count went today. Is this the Hunter Biden one? Naomi testifies. So that one got like 117,000 views. This one here, 8.4K views. I think that was a live testimonial. Yeah, that's the Hunter Biden thing. This is from today. Yep. 4.2K views, 15K views, 2.6K views, 24K views, 4.1K views, 6.6K views. So you can see what's happening there. Again, they have over almost 2 million, but they lost 10,000. And then there's this. Candace Owens has announced that she would like to interview Briahna Joy Gray. So she said, hey, Bree, would love to interview you. Feels like that could be fun. Feels like that could be fun, Candace Owens said. So I would say, for people asking, should Briahna Joy Gray do that interview? I would say if Bree does that interview, definitely make sure that you hold Candace's feet to the fire. I would not do that interview and just be like, yeah, let's just have a fun time and, just chat and stuff. All the things that you have been critical about Candace over before in reference to policy, these policy conversations, I would bring those issues up. If that were me, I wouldn't. Otherwise, I would not do it. I would bring those issues up. I would also ask this question. Why not reach out to Bree before this happened? Why not interview Bree before she got fired from Rising? Right? So is Candace trying to, extend some type of olive branch towards Bree? Maybe. because they have this thing in common now? Or is Candace trying to get the bag? Is Candace reaching out because she genuinely is concerned and cares about what happened to Bree? Or is Candace reaching out because Bree is trending? These are questions we have to ask. Some people don't like that. Some people don't like to ask these questions, but these are questions that we have to ask. But Rising firing Bree, all that did was make her more popular. I'm willing to bet she probably has more subscribers, probably got more subscribers recently because of this. They keep trying to cancel people, and a lot of times it just makes them more popular. So to me, I feel like Rising is done. They had multiple opportunities. At one point, Rising was a powerhouse show. Like when they had Bree and Kim on at the same time, I thought that was fire. I thought that dynamic between Bree and Kim was pretty based. They messed that up. And it's very clear that they're not pro-free speech. Now, Dave Rubin, I was going to show you the tweet that he made about Bree when she got fired, but he deleted it because he's a coward. Dave Rubin was cheering on the fact that Briahna Joy Gray was fired. All these people from the Daily Wire and other sources that claim to be so pro-free speech, all of a sudden, they're not pro-free speech when it comes to Israel. And I had said this before, that both sides have their own examples of cancel culture. So a lot of those voices were full of shit. Now, people can say what they want to say about me, but when Candace got fired, I actually said, I came on the show and I said, that's not right. You can't do that. That's censorship. She does not have to be pro-Israel to be on a platform. I didn't agree with that. And people said, no, Sabrina, don't go defend Candace. No. Listen, I said that part. And then I also went on and said the other parts, other issues that I had with Candace when it came to policy and the way that she tried to like sidestep the Black community. I also talked about that as well. But I was consistent when it came to this particular issue. And I was consistent because I said it does not matter if you like Candace Owens or not. What was done to Candace Owens was wrong. And if you want to be happy about her being canceled because you don't like her, then what are you going to do when it happens to someone that you do like? And then this week that happened to someone that a lot of people do like. It happened to Bree. So people can say whatever they want about me, but I was consistent on this issue. That's when you put the personality aside and you look at what was done. And I don't agree with deplatforming people. I don't agree with cancel culture. I don't agree with this, whether I like that person or not. Because silencing Candace, because I saw that silencing Candace was just a step or just a week or so away before they try to silence all of us, whether we worked for the Daily Wire or not. But The Hill, you should be ashamed. It's embarrassing. Not cool at all. Not cool at all. Don't have to worry about me coming back on there again. Don't have to worry about me watching it again. I'm good. It's really messed up. Really messed up, man. So if they do it to them, they can do it to you. Always remember that. You ain't got to like the person to pay attention to what's happening to them. So I think that Bree will be fine. She has her own podcast, Bad Faith Podcast, which she had before she was a co-host on Rising. You guys can always still watch Bree on Bad Faith. Most of you were already watching that anyway. But I did reach out to Bree and, I did tell her, I was like, you don't need them. They were lucky to get you. You don't need them. Really. You don't. I said the same thing when it happened to Kim. You don't need them. So some people didn't realize that Bree and Kim already had their own shows before they were hosts on Rising. And Kim Iverson is doing really well, particularly on Rumble. So I think she's proven that she does not need Rising. So there you go. She'll be all right. She'll be all right. But pay attention to the people who don't say anything, though. Pay attention to the ones that are silent. Interesting. All right. Let's go to comments here. Thank you, Sparky. Maybe looks like a fat Sauger. Oh, God. Thank you, Tim. I think a George Galloway movement is coming to the States. How many people are independents in the USA, Sabs? Vote Jill Stein and let's truly shake this ish up. I don't know how many people are independents. I can check that, though. Thank you, Sparky. I guess Bree just couldn't handle Robbie's vast intellect. No, Bree said like Robbie had nothing to do with this. New York Varsity, let's call this what it is. They weaponized this woman as a political hit job on Bree. Thank you, Varsity. New York Varsity, you knew what was up. See, me and you, we're right here. We're right here. We were thinking alike. We were thinking alike. Thank you, King of Kings. Go ahead and unscribe from the Dirt Hill Falling. Dirt Hill Falling. Maybe we should call it the Hill Sinking instead of the Hill Rising. Thank you, Ninja. That lady also accused Americans in Michigan of treason by claiming they chant death to America. That ticked me off too. Yes, she did say that as well. Like, no, that is not what people were chanting. They were saying that they were going to be uncommitted for Joe Biden. Thank you, Sparky. This nurse is either propagandized or a crisis actor. Thank you, Grapeseed. They only know what the Israeli news says. Shout out to Sophia. Thank you so much for the super chat, Sophia Tremolos. Gabby, I would love for you to interview Matthew Miller. I don't think Matthew Miller would love that. Thank you, Dennis. The Hill's gone downhill for real now. Kim, Katie, and Briahna gone. They're lost. Go, 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 girls. Yippee! Sabby for 100K reach. Thank you so much. Thank you. We got here. Eric Gray, what's up? Of course, grapes are just part of how white cis heteronormative settler colonial domination works. You put some things together there, Eric. Thank you, Chris. Tinfoil hat moment. I never trusted Robbie, and he's almost never been ideological aligned with Bree. Something ain't clean in the milk, if you ask me. Well, he's supposed to be the other side. Like that's how it worked. Even when it was Crystal and Sauger, like Sauger was the other side, you know. LW, crazy, Sabby, you get every interview on this. Great work. I did for a minute there, huh? Thank you, Sparky. If the lady Bree interviewed wasn't a crisis actor and was just propaganda, she obviously was told to be sure and use the term believe women. Yeah, and it almost looked like she was reading a script. It almost looked like she was reading in front of her. How do I know that? Because when I used to interview students for admissions, the students that didn't come to in-person interviews and I would interview them virtually, I could always tell if they were actually reading their responses. Thank you for the super sticker, Cretian. Thank you, Skyza. The veil is off. Scott just got dragged off a plane and Bree gets fired. So they won't talk. We live on a corporate lie. The Truman Show. That's a good movie, Skyzer. If you guys have never seen The Truman Show, please watch it. Thank you, LW. Kissin's job is to make racist comments. There you go. And they don't seem to have a problem with it, right? Thank you, Emile. She is not working for the Zionists like Bill Maher with his cringe racism. Bill Maher makes me sick to my stomach. Thank you, sir. Bikes a lot. I did see you before that interview on Rising and BC. You were on Rising. I did see you before that interview on Rising. And because you were on Rising, I found your show. Thank you, Dr. Harden. Every time I see this, I want to say Dr. Dre. Oh, Dre Harden. I want to say Dr. Dre. Thank you, Dre. Biden's nuclear department nutcase is certainly DEI. He said so himself. I'm sure he did. Thank you, Colby. Bree didn't advocate for reparations enough for me, but it's sad. Bree, Candace Owens, Mark Lamont Hill, Black, all fired for the same thing. Thank you, Colby. Bree and Mark Lamont Hill fired for the same reason. Thank you, Lorez. When y'all unsub from Hill, don't search for them. That helps them with the algo. Just look at your subscription tab or search Hill in your watch history. Damn, Lorez. I didn't know that. Lorez coming with the Lorez coming with the download. Let's get those comments on Rockfin Eric. And guys, don't forget to smash that like if you have not done so. Thank you. Thank you, Roger. Look, Kim knew exactly what she was getting into when she accepted the job. First time she appeared on your show, Sabs, she was talking about how she went into a panic when her dad told her he watches Rising. Oh no, Dad, don't watch it. They pull viewers from legit indie media, burying us in the algorithm under the guise of independent media. You made your bed, now you got to sleep in it. Damn, Roger. Why not interview Bree before she got fired from Shapiro? Candace, not even conservative Black peeps don't want her. They were like, please take her back. She's grifting, throwing us under the bus. Interesting there, Roger. Well. Guys, that is it for me tonight. I'm off this Sunday, so I won't see you again until Tuesday evening. Yeah. All right, guys. We'll have a really great weekend. I hope you enjoy yourselves. I hope to have a good weekend. I got to go back to, I have training tomorrow morning. So back to that. And then I think I'm going to go head down to Fenway tomorrow. Sounds like a couple of us are going to meet up over there. So should be a fun, cool time. So I'm excited about that. And Celtics won last night, guys. So they have won game 1 and game 2, I believe, is Sunday night. So for those of you basketball lovey-doveys like me, I'm crossing my fingers. That's all. I'm crossing my fingers. I don't want to jinx them. So we're going to knock on wood. That's right, Eric. Celtics Sunday. That's right. Oh, no. Who said that? Welch's Grape said, let's go Mavs. Dallas. I say it during football season too, because there's Cowboy fans no matter where I've lived in this country. I feel like Cowboy fans just exist everywhere. So I never got away from them. And the Cowboy fans are always like over the top, like they're extra. And so I always would say, like, people are like, yeah, I'm a Cowboys fan. I would say, Dallas. All right, guys, that is it for me. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.